La, 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 la.
What's really fun is we're doing our dance that is the syncing dance, but all of the platforms we need to sync on, we're not even streaming to anymore because they're punks and they don't push our material, so they don't get us anymore. Take that, Facebook. Anyway,
Yep,
we are
absolutely.
officially a YouTube exclusive over here on Breaking the Barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Breaking the Barriers. Today, we're continuing our mini series on the foundational human gifts and continuing to explore these different configurations, if you will, of how our human gifts can manifest in our beingness. And so, we have covered so far the gift of empathy, the gift of energy sensitivity, the gift of earth sense, both booster and first. And today we're getting into trifectas, which are those of us, myself included, who decided to build our gift package with all three instead of specializing.
Mm-hmm.
And
We
that's
did.
really what it is about, is not specializing. But yes, Red, if you'd be so kind as to introduce yourself.
My name is Red Moonigle. I'm a psychic catalyst, a teacher, and a healer. And uh, part of this series is my special focus. It's been something I've been passionate about probably my whole life, to explain just the foundation stuff. Like, you can get all the fancy names to stuff, but this is just like breaking it down into the tiniest pieces, the most specific, and synthesizing all of the information through my life that just make it make sense, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And making humanity make sense is an important part of our journey where we're at right now. So
Yeah.
it's good stuff. And just in case you don't know me, I'm Safrianna and Red, the Queer Spirit Guide. I am a trauma therapist and transformational mentor. It's a tongue twister. I have too many titles now, and they just get longer every day, I feel like. And as a trifecta, I hope to shed some light, some extra light in this conversation about the reality of living with trifecta gifts. Now, Red, I know part of the conversation about trifectas that's been confusing to some people, or there's been some resistance around sometimes, is the idea that everybody is secretly a trifecta.
Nope. Nope. I can see why people go there, right? Like, it's very much similar to, in our society, we're taught from a very young age you can do anything, right? Well, in theory you can, right? But with this, it's a little different. And like, it's what you wrote into your blueprint. And there are so many books in our metaphysical and spiritual communities that are written from the perspective that everybody's an empath, everybody senses energy, so everybody's all of that. And we use the language very interchangeably, which makes it even more confusing.
And I'm the worst as a trifecta for using
And
it interchangeably.
and trifectas are usually kind of like the guiltiest party of that. But I don't mean that in a bad way. And I never want to vilify anyone in any way at all. What I'm just saying is that I get pushback because I get rigid in how I talk about things, because I'm trying to be really, really specific. And I actually just had a conversation with somebody who has never been introduced to any of this at all. And I asked them, I said, what's the definition of empathy? And they literally gave me the dictionary definition of empathy. And I was like, great. Do you feel other people's emotions? And they went, no, like I get a vibe. And I went, there you go. That's energy sensitivity. And they went, are you saying I'm not empathic? I went, do you actually feel someone's anger or rage or sadness or resentment? Like, do you feel what they're feeling, their actual emotions? Well, no. I went, okay. There are people who do. And that doesn't mean you don't have compassion and sympathy and the ability to go, I broke my leg, you broke your leg. I can understand that, right? And we all have this human societal, we want to do things together, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with trifectas, it's easy, if your energy sensitivity is never been acknowledged, for you to start using the empathic language in those circles. And also because you might be a deeply feeling, deeply caring person. I fall into that category. I am a deeply caring, deeply feeling person, but I'm still never going to feel if you're frustrated or angry at me. Like, I'm not going to know unless you use the words. Even the vibe, I'll get wrong. So trifectas, when they walk in the world, they can feel all that energy and they can feel all those emotions, and they're boosted by that earth sense. They get a real good rocket boost with that. So it becomes more amplified, and they talk that way and they teach that way. And if they don't even recognize that their gifts are a combo, they're going to make assumptions that everybody can get there.
Yep. I mean, I know I did for the longest time in my life. I thought that, like, I did not understand. Now I'm starting to pick it up. And we'll probably talk about this later, like the challenges of being a trifecta. But I'm starting to pick up what a conversation with an empath versus a conversation with an energy sensitive feels like. Now, if they're using both, then I get really curious, like what's happening there. Are they a trifecta, or did they learn the language? Because we've talked about how energy sensitives can learn empathic language, and empaths can absolutely learn energy sensitive language to vibe with their energy sensitive friends, right? Because we all want to be connected. But there is a very distinct difference between those two particular gifts. And for me, with both, I've been very confused especially when I was younger, when people would not pick up on the emotional information in the room and would completely miss the memo on something. And I would just be like flabbergasted. How could they have possibly missed that memo? It's so obvious to me. And so I walked around the world like feeling a little crazy town until this trifecta thing came forward and it made sense. So the reason that not everybody is secretly a trifecta is because, again, as Red said, like, we don't all build our blueprints that way. And I hear a lot of languaging as we talk about the gifts, and I'm in community with other people. A lot of people are like, oh, well, I want to be a trifecta. Again, we want what we don't have often. And it's no more than that, because empaths want to be energy sensitive, and energy sensitives want to be empaths, and everybody wants to be a trifecta. Like, whatever. We want what we're not often. And as a trifecta, it doesn't make things easier. In fact, it often complicates things even more, because it's so hard for a trifecta to peel apart what is the emotional information, what is the vibe, and where is it all sourcing from sometimes, because it can be an overwhelming amount of information. So when we have one of the foundational gifts in a booster, or we have Earth Sense first, right? We're really, really specialized in those gifts. And, I look at my my two closest relationships, right? One is an empath, one is an energy sensitive with both Earth Sense booster. But their specialization, how much more fine-tuned their empathy or their energy sensitivity is versus mine, is so wildly different.
Yes.
We want this overlap. There's no one that's better than the other. So like, I want to say that as a trifecta, like, I'm not over here like, wow, I know more than you know. Like, if you have one of the gifts or gift plus booster, you are more specialized. And this is just how I feel in my life in general, is that jack of all trades, master of none. Very powerful in all of them, but like, none of them are specialized for me. Now, that's not the case for all trifectas. Some trifectas do have one of those gifts that is much more powerful. I know a trifecta who the empathy is like this much.
It's there, but
is like this much. And then they have the sense booster that's woven in there. So there's so many different configurations of how the triangles can look, but that's the way to like look at trifecta, is it's these three gifts that are trying to triangulate between one another, which means they're constantly feeding back on one another.
Yep. And how much you've accessed your Earth Sense booster makes a difference too. Like, it's a Pandora's box in so many ways. You can open it a tiny little bit. You can't ever get that lid back on, but you can try to like minimize it, but it still amplifies something. And once you embrace it, it starts to amplify all kinds of things. And the specialization, when you have trifectas, so say you've got an empathic leading trifecta, that they will often use empathic language more than they will use energy language. And you add that earth sense booster, and whatever it is that their bio number is, or whatever it is that they are currently swirling in, that earth sense booster will amplify that. I mean, it can't amplify. If you're going to use your gift for bad things, it's not going to amplify that, because it just kind of like, and this is what gets really confusing for trifectas and people working for trifectas, is that if that ego gets in the way and you start thinking, well, I'm going to use my gifts for selfish, icky means, right? The earth sense booster just kind of dissipates, and their gifts become, I don't know, I've heard it described like all the potentiality was there and then it got halved, or it's like they used to be able to do the thing, but then it just isn't there. So then they're trying to figure out like, who put this curse on me and who put this thing on me? Like, it really can. And I've seen people spin where they're absolutely convinced that somebody's out to get them, or somebody put a curse on them, or somebody is limiting their potentials or their gifts. And 9 times out of 10, if there's an earth sense booster involved and they've tried using their gifts for icky things, nobody's done a damn thing to them. It's the earth sense booster that is no longer accessible, because you can't use that shit for bad things.
Yeah.
Like,
totally
you
makes
just
sense.
can't.
Totally makes sense. No, and I can think back to times in my own life when that exact story was true, right? There was a major swirl in a community. There was a falling out. There was, and in spiritual communities, you never know, right?
Yeah,
really never
absolutely.
knew. But like, I'd go into like overprotection mode and be so scared, and also feel so much less powerful and grounded and rooted and like in who I am. And that I can imagine being so confusing for a trifecta who's used to having their whole triangle online. Like, for suddenly one of them to go off, it's like,
there's something that in a long time ago, I had my own personal experience with my earth sense first, kind of going a little bit offline. Okay, a lot offline. I kind of lost my mind for a couple of years. I was a teenager. It happens. And one of the things that I learned through that experience, being somebody with earth sense first, is that I was going to have to embrace, and this is before this term was ever a thing, and now they're calling it radical self-acceptance, radical truth, radical transparency, right? I didn't have words for that. Nobody used those words. I'm a little bit older. Those are fairly new, like combination of words. And I embraced that. I embraced it to the point where there were a lot of times that I got feedback like, you're a little harsh and you're a little abrasive and you're a little too much or whatever. And I'm like, valid. I probably am. But the thing that terrifies me the most, being somebody who has earth sense first, is feeling as though I am not connected to my gifts. So it took probably about 20 years for me to really kind of go, oh, if this is what's happening to me, then what's happening to those trifectas if theirs goes offline? If they no longer have access to something that they've relied on in everything that they do when they're in that liminal space between the shadow and the light, right? Like, what happens if they can't feel that extra thing that they're always feeling? What if they no longer feel that resonance, that connection to all things that they have when it's online? what happens to their empathy, right? Those empathy-driven trifectas that navigate the world with their little emotional sensors. Like, what happens when that booster no longer gives them that extra layer of what's happening with this person and what are they feeling, and where is that in their body? And like, how do you navigate a world when all of a sudden you can't hear anything, or you can't see anything, or you can't, like, I can imagine that would be pretty awful, because I know how it feels when mine goes offline. So there's a quality of the trifecta experience that, when you said that people like want to be trifectas, they're like, well, everybody's potentially a trifecta. It's like somebody telling me, well, everybody's autistic. Not a true statement, whole different conversation. But it's the same thing with trifecta. Like, not everybody is a trifecta. And the process of how they navigate the world is very similar to Earth Sense First. So it would be extremely easy, having had this happen so many times. I wish I would be a millionaire if I could go back and say, give me $1 for saying that, which is, Red, you must be empathic, because there's a correlation about how dynamic that Earth Sense First is compared to trifectas. And I've been willing to say it is probably difficult to discern a trifecta with an equilateral combination like you have, Safi, from somebody who has Earth Sense First. It would be tricky to untangle what that is.
Yeah, the big difference seems to be in the hardware, so to speak, because from what we've seen now, there are no absolutes in this universe. No, we can't assert that. But
nope.
It seems as though trifectas do have that empathic sensor hardware, whereas Earth Sense First don't tend to have that hardware. I'm sure there's an Earth Sense First out there that has filaments or something.
Maybe.
I'm sure they exist, but
maybe.
It's not, because
Earth Sense
First are rare to begin with, and trifectas are rare to begin with. We don't have a huge sample size of either that we're like looking at for all of that, but it's so important just to acknowledge how all of these different gifts do show up differently across every single person. So even as we've been talking about these gifts, and even as we're looking at trifecta, again, everybody's package is going to look different in terms of how it's actually built out. Mm-hmm. So that loss, when I've disconnected from Earth Sense Booster, it's definitely like I feel alone, less powerful, confused. And the quality of my ability to pick up on the energy and the empath information is significantly muted. So it's definitely, I think that trifectas are very sensitive. We should definitely talk about this. It's a double-edged sword, right? In that we are very sensitive, and it's very hard to pull the wool over our eyes, because we can pick up on, like, all right, you're putting out this vibe, and your underlying emotion is this. They're incongruent, like something's off here. So we'll spot a lie a mile away. It's very, very hard to fib to us.
Oh yeah.
Great thing.
I will validate that.
And in that, we drive people a little bonkers, because we see right through them, and that can create relational issues. It also can create that sense of like, well, I'm already picking up on all this information. Do I even need to follow up on asking about it? The answer is yes.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it's very easy for a trifecta to make those leaps and assumptions, because we can feel so much of what is present in an interaction, or present in information, present in the physical field around us. I feel like trifectas are very sensitive to quantum level stuff, because it's the subtlety and all the little flavors of things. And again, every trifecta is going to pick up on different things. So
I mean, an energy sensitive driving trifecta that has the empathy in the background, depending on how much empathy is supporting that energy sensitivity, will depend on sometimes what that flavor of dissonance is. And energy sensitive, I mean, by nature, one thing that I've gleaned out is energy sensitives by nature aren't necessarily going to be great lie detector tests on an emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
They might be on an intellectual level. I'm thinking of a 5 I know who's very energy sensitive. Isn't a trifecta, but energy sensitive 5, like the bullshit meter's still working, but it may not be emotion based.
Mm-hmm.
Their emotions will react to it, but they're not picking up on your emotions. But a trifecta that's energy sensitive, that has a little bit of empathy, they may pick up that dissonance of the quality. They may go to an intellectual place, but they're still picking up on that dissonance, that lack of both pickups are equally getting the same message, right? And when the Earth Sense booster is online with them, there's a quality of messaging that's, again, depending on how much empathy is there, there's a quality of less, or an ability to disconnect from the emotional chaos, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But an empathic driven trifecta, no matter how much energy sensitivity is boosting that, I've noticed there's a little bit more. I mean, equilaterals are a little different. You're a little different, Safi, but those empathically driven trifectas do sometimes get caught up in that emotional stuff. They get entangled easier. So what gift is driving the bus can give you clues, or the behaviors can give you clues as to which is driving the bus. That's where I was going with that. I was like, I said that backwards.
Yeah. And even though, again, like normally energy sensitivity might run the bus, a trifecta can have a gift go offline, or push it to the side and reject it. I mean, I've rejected my empathy before, and just been in the vibes and felt really cut off from people because I had my sensors like tucked. So I know, I could imagine a trifecta that maybe only has a little bit of empathy, but for whatever reason is rejecting their massive energy sensitivity part of their package, like trying to counterbalance with that and go into that more and either strengthen that.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually seen people that are just empathic or just energy sensitive with Earth Sense Booster trying to only use their Earth Sense Booster. And it doesn't work. Like it can't, it's a booster. It's not like, it's not driving the bus. It's a passenger in your bus. You know, like it's going to be there, but it doesn't have a driver's license. It can't drive the bus. So like it can't even reach the pedals to make it go, right? Like you the analogy really works, because if you're an empath and you're thinking, well, I want to work on my access and my booster to the energy sensitivity I may have access to in my booster, you can't make that drive the bus. You're going to get mixed signals. You're going to drive into the ditch over and over and over again. And you're going to wonder why shit don't work right. Right. So, and it's the same thing for energy sensitives that have access to a little bit of empathy. And I say a little bit, it's just a different flavor of empathy is what I'm saying. They don't have the sensor feelers like empaths do. So if you're trying to drive the bus with empathy, when that's not your primary gift, you're going to get a lot of mixed messaging. You're going to get a lot of things wrong, especially if your ego's involved, because then it's not even accessible and you're just spinning, I guess is the best word. And trifectas are very powerful. And there comes something with, and we talked about it a little bit with Earth Sense First. Like, you don't really want Earth Sense First, trust me. I would, there are days when I'm like, can I give it back?
I mean, I feel the same way about being a trifecta. So
right.
Again,
because
we want what we don't have.
Right. And I grew up a good chunk of my life really kind of wishing I was more empathic, right? I mean, I am not empathic at all. So a little bit would be a lot for me. And I mean, it took me into my 40s to come to a place of peace with that. And that's a long time to live your life wanting something that I'm never going to have.
Right.
And trifectas have this amazing capacity to access all of those things. And they are sensitive, and it does require a great deal of effort to find that luminal space between the shadow and the light so that you can access your earth sense booster. I hate to use the word in a consistent way because life is not consistent, so that's not what I mean, but more of like a where you can recognize where you are in that luminal space so that you can recognize, oh, I'm going over here in the shadow. I can feel that absence. I can feel that loss. I can feel that things aren't working right. So that you can look and see and evaluate and, I don't know, synthesize, process, analyze. I don't know what word to use to feel feel your way back into that liminal space, because the other side is that whole trend over into that toxic positivity and toxic spiritual bypassing place actually makes you unaccessible to your gift there too, because it's not actually in that liminal space.
Yeah, I mean, this is why it's so important that, again, we be able to have these conversations and educate more people, because when I've heard the term highly sensitive person, I now often think that might be a trifecta label, because, and again, I'm not earth sense first. I'm as close as one can be without
Yeah,
being cool, great, but I'm
absolutely.
not. So I can't say what that experience is like. But the amount of information that I receive as a trifecta is so overwhelming at times,
Mm-hmm.
like completely and utterly overwhelming,
Yes.
and completely and utterly overwhelming if I'm around humans.
Yep.
Like, it's all, when I'm on my own, I'm still picking up on things like miles away, and that's probably me being a 9 and having the bio 9 layered on top of the trifecta. So that's not going to be every trifecta for sure. But when
Right.
I'm around people, whether it be the grocery store, whether it be at home, whether it be at a family member's house, like, I am picking up on it all unless I tuck literally everything in and shut it all off. And that's not what anyone wants to do. And, I want to validate that too, because when we feel the need to shrink in our gifts or shut them off, we don't feel like ourselves. We don't feel that authenticity. We don't feel that satisfaction. We don't feel grounded in who we are.
Yeah, I think the thing that comes back frequently is that trifectives have told me over and over and again that they feel isolated, they feel misunderstood, they feel that their experiences and awarenesses go beyond those around them. They feel like they're, I think marginalized is a better word. They're labeled as so different and so sensitive that they feel like they need to go into isolation to protect themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and I think those are all valid things. Those with Earth Sense first do get that too, but it's different depending on how that configuration is working. But I think I've wondered if trifectas aren't highly sensitive people, because there's enough of them that it kind of matches the numbers I've loosely logged.
Yeah, and I mean, the descriptions I've seen of highly sensitive people usually are like emotional information overload, picking up on everything, feeling like you're constantly doing emotional labor in the background, like all of those
Or
things.
energetic, because those trifectas that have that energy side seem to have some of the highly sensitive um, to touch and taste, and they will seem to all have a little bit of synesthesia, which I will tell you, I know I have synesthesia. So I've started to, I say started about 20 years ago, I was like, I wonder if that's a thing, right? Like, but when you don't have enough data, you don't know. But it's I've never had a guide say 100% that's correct. And that's where I usually back away from absolutes. When I have guides validate something, that's when I'll go, okay, I'm safe, or I feel safe saying that that's a thing. But when a guy doesn't validate, I kind of go, maybe. I don't
Verdict
know.
out on that one still.
And the sensitivity leads to this confusion when they're kids. I think the thing that I'm not a child behavior psychologist. I am not. I do have an education degree. I did take a lot of early childhood education classes because my kids were small and I wanted to not screw my kids up. But I worked with kids for a really long time in education, and I worked with the teenagers, the ones that, teenagers kind of lose their mind. All those hormones, everything, like the cheese slides off the cracker. Sometimes it's not even on the plate, like it's a thing. And I loved that group of kids. And they taught me so much about their gifts, not even knowing, because I could observe while I'm teaching, and they gave me so much information. But the ones that were the most, hate to use the word damage, but they were the ones that hurt the most, and that their teenage years seemed to be the worst comparatively. I use that word loosely. This is not an absolute statement. But I worked with high risk youth, kids that were considered at risk populations. And those trifecta kiddos would tell me awful stories about being a very sensitive trifecta at an early age with a completely oblivious family in so many ways, right?
Right.
And their hurt and their trauma, even if they were kind of regular middle class, what you think of as like a normal upbringing. I don't think there's any such thing as a normal upbringing, but what people think of as a normal upbringing, those kids, if they were trifectas, by the time I'd get them at 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, man, like that trauma is, their gifts are not, they don't trust their gifts. They don't trust any of their senses. They don't trust any of their awareness. They don't, and they shut down so quick and so fast.
Yep.
And I don't work with parents with kids. It's not my specialty. But when I have had friends that have had kids, I wait till they're ready. But as soon as that door is open, I go all the way in that door, and it's going to shut behind me if it has to. But I want to make sure they understand that what we think of as good parenting with trifecta kiddos is not.
Right.
It's not good parenting. We have to stop, and we need to really evaluate these highly sensitive children. They're not over imagining it. They do need boundaries, but you do have to be really careful with punishment. I don't know how to quite say what I'm trying to say, but corrective behavior guidance, maybe. Like, you do have to be careful with that because they're still kids. They're going to stretch all the boundaries. Highly sensitive kids are just like every other kid.
Mm-hmm.
And that redirection needs to be with awareness that they're picking up all kinds of stuff. And never, ever lie to your children. I don't care if they're energy sensitive. I don't care if they're empathic. If your child comes up to you and says, "Hey, mom, why are you sad?" Don't fucking lie to that kid. Excuse my French. But you say, "Yes,
This is an
I am
explicit
sad."
podcast.
Yes, I am sad. And why do you do that? Because with a trifecta child, well, with an empathic child and a trifecta child, if you say, "No, I'm not sad," or "It's nothing to worry about," or whatever the excuse is that you think you're buffering, you're protecting your child, you're actually harming them.
Yeah.
Because they know.
Oh my
They
gosh.
know.
I can think back to so many moments now. Yeah. And it's interesting because, of course, super duper childhood trauma survivor. Like, if it was a trauma that a child could endure, I probably endured it. It was pretty cruddy. Yeah. And so I have Swiss cheese memory. Like, it's mostly just holes in there. It's blank space. But the more that I learn about my gifts, the more that I put those puzzle pieces together, the more little bits do come back. And I'll remember that time that, I was frozen in fear because I was picking up on something. And then finally I'd have the bravery to ask about the thing that I'm picking up on only to be shut down.
Yeah.
And, that does lead to us shutting down our gifts, second guessing them, not, and this goes again for all gifts, but especially trifectas who really are picking up on some really detailed things, very nuanced things, to be shut down when we come forward with a perception
Yes.
is a way to shut our intuition down for life. I know so
Yes.
many people who have never gotten that intuition back.
Yeah.
For me, it took fighting for 15 plus years to begin to get it back, and it's still consistently in the process of blooming, but for the longest time it was completely clamped down, completely shut, to the point where I, even if I got intuitive information, would just immediately shut it down. Nope.
Yeah.
We're just going to ignore that because they're going to ignore it too, and I'm just not going to be taken seriously. That's it's really interesting. I'm in a book club right now with a fellow author friend, Anna Bartolucci, and we're reading Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And there was this whole section on fear of why we don't do our creative things in the world. And the fear that I chose to highlight in the book group and talk about was the fear of not being taken seriously. So I just put that together, right? Because as a child, I wasn't taken seriously for all of the things that I was picking up on. And it's so funny to look back too and hear my mom now share stories about what I was like as a little kid, because that Earth Sense booster was so online.
Yep.
And then I went to public school and it was like, right? It was recess for 15 minutes and that was it. That was the nature connection. And then you had to come home and do homework. You didn't have time to go out and play because they just piled homework on you. And then you get to middle school and forget it. Like, we deserve to have the right. We have the birthright to access our gifts and play with them, whatever they look like. And it's so sad when it's shut down by, outside forces.
I will acknowledge my privilege in that my dad was in the military, and when we went to Germany, my first kindergarten teacher recognized pretty damn quickly that I was, they used words like gifted, and I recognize now that's autistic, ADHD, Earth Sense first on crack, so she was going to notice. And she was a really, really good teacher. And she encouraged my parents to send me to German public school. And German public school is a whole different ball of wax. You don't go to school all day long in first and second grade. You only go half a day. And when you do start going to full days, there's so much play. There's so much creativity. I mean, swimming and music and art are part of the curriculum and are part of the curriculum till you're like in 5th and 6th grade. And so when I tell people that, I went through a very abusive childhood too, in a different way, I also built a very strange blueprint, clearly, that when I say I've never been closed, I've never been in the closet, I've never had anything happen till I was a teenager and I tried to be normal. That's when the cheese slid off my cracker. I'm not ever going to be normal, but I tried. I really tried. I've never really not known who I am and what my gifts are. I had a very unique experience where many people have this period of time in their childhood where their parents inadvertently, by accident, I'm 100% certain, by most counts, it's by accident, that they diminish, shut down, and traumatize, especially those trifecta kids, to the point where they shut it down, block it off, put it behind walls, because it's safer that way, right? Like, it's safer to navigate. And it's also extraordinarily isolating for trifectas. And even a trifecta that is completely shut down, they are not accessing their Earth Sense first. They're denying their empathy. They're denying their energy sensitivity. One of the things I've noticed that kind of, it's still there. You can't not have it, which is this awareness of stuff, even if you think you've blocked it off behind walls. And that creates an ongoing weight of moral injury and moral fatigue. And it compounds the feelings of isolation and the burnout risk, I think is the word I'm looking for these trifectas, because they're spending so much effort all the time to not access, but it seeps through. It's not like you can't turn your, okay, it would be like saying, stop breathing, Safrianna.
Right.
You're not allowed to breathe anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, like, yeah.
That's going to last all of 30 seconds at the absolute most. Well,
Right.
and as you're talking, what's really occurring to me too is that if you're a trifecta, and again, this is going to apply to others, but it's really going to sink in extra deep for trifecta just because of the nature of trifecta, which is that if you've experienced abuse and you have shut down your gifts as much as you humanly can,
Mhm.
you're not in yourself because you're not being yourself because you've now shut down your gifts. So you're really going to continue the patterns and the trends of abuse that you've been around.
Yes.
So chances are you're going to continue to get into really yucky relationships that mirror those earlier dynamics that also shut down and deny your gifts.
Yep.
And where if you're using your gifts, again, especially if you're a trifecta, you're picking up on the vibes in the room, you're picking up on that other person's emotions, and you're in a bad crowd, so to speak, like you're not around healthy people who are building you up, you're going to continue to feel depressed. You're going to continue to feel worthless and diminished, and like your gifts don't matter, and like you don't matter. And that is a pattern so many people get into it, and that comes and stems from that original point of being shut down for who we are. So
it does, and it contributes to this very interesting clinically psychological condition of the psychopath. And I've been asked before, like, are just psychopaths evil entities? Are they all null voids? And I'm like, there's no all or nothing in the universe so far. But I've studied psychology, and I've been around people who've done some bad things, because I'm a weirdo and volunteer in places where people are like, oh my God, don't you not feel safe? Meh, I'm good. And I've met people that are clinical psychopaths. And if you talk to them and you go all the way back to that childhood, if they don't have the holy memory thing, some of them do, like they just don't remember anything before they're 6 or something, right? It's going to be hard to navigate through that. But they are clinically the definition of someone who's using their empathy for not good things. They have that narcissistic behavior. They're literally using their energy awareness in a self-serving, destructive way, which is very sociopathic. You take those two things together and you're going to end up with a psychopath, a clinical psychopath who has no ability to let themselves be anything other than selfness, right? Like it's all about them and their needs and their wants and their desires. And I don't think all of them were once necessarily trifectas, because not everybody has their sense booster, even if they have those two gifts. But I can imagine that trauma would be really awful, and how it can go sideways can be really awful.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, it's a sad, unfortunate reality that until we get enough until we break the barrier of enough education, because that's a huge barrier right now, right? People are barely getting communication education, let alone like the subtlety of how human beings show up in the world. So we've got a lot to work against.
We do. But I think one of the biggest things to think about, and I've had enough conversations to know with trifectas that me even just saying the last couple sentences is like, oh my God, am I one of those people? Stop. If you can have that thought, You're probably not. Take a deep breath. This is just a barrier breaking informational baseline, right? Trifectas, when they swirl, they just don't have access to their earth sense booster, and that can make them feel very disconnected even more. And so very dissociative. So it's important that if you suspect you're a trifecta, you may or may not be, I don't know, but nobody who's actually a trifecta or actually an earth sense first actually says, I am so glad I am this, until they've gone through all of the journey of what the hell was I thinking?
Oh, yeah. We've definitely had why did I design my blueprint the way that I did? What was I thinking? Though I also don't know what else I'd rather be than me. And that's where we need to get in our journeys, whatever our gift package is. Like, that's why I've emphasized what I've emphasized about there is no better gift set. They're all just potential presets that you got to write into your blueprint, and you picked one for a reason, and hopefully someday you'll figure out what that is. For me, I'm slowly discovering that is so that I can educate about the nuance and teach people and offer perspectives and do the Harmony 9 thing. Like, I built my blueprint very intentionally, clearly.
You did.
So remember that you did too.
I did too. Yeah,
everyone built them intentionally. And again, we've talked throughout the series about some of the pitfalls and the shadow sides, and I just want to circle back to the good things of trifectas before we wrap today, which, again, it can be a very beautiful, nuanced, and deep experience to be able to sense the energy in a space, and to therefore know how to make it more comfortable for people, potentially, to know who in the room is uncomfortable and might need a little bit more TLC, to feel that support and resonance of the earth beneath us, and to know that Mama Gaia's got us. Like, it's such a beautiful set of gifts to have when we're really able to be in alignment and harmony with those gifts. And like all the gifts, it goes sideways quick when we get caught up in our human bullshit and our egos and infighting and all the other stuff that we get distracted with.
100%.
So coming back to love and
don't assume.
Yeah.
Any of you trifectas out there in the world, please do not assume that everybody's a trifecta, because they are not.
No.
And that's probably is equally as bad as you as a trifecta not being validated and honored and held in safety and trust when you were a child.
Yeah. We all need that safety and validation of who we uniquely are. And there's no one size fits all right answer.
Nope.
But yeah, if you have follow-up questions, I just want to remind you, Red does blueprints, blueprint downloads. They're 4-hour sessions that you can have in either 2 2-hour appointments or one long 4-hour appointment. I did the long 4-hour appointment, and to unpack what your gift package looks like, along with a bunch of other stuff. And I'm also here to help you decode that.
Oh my goodness. Safi's decoding. Y'all gotta know. It's kind of part of my little spiel now. You get your download, process it for a couple of weeks, call Safi, because she has that 9 harmonious teacher trifecta thing. Because all of what's coming through me is coming through my earth sense and my gifts. So I do not have some of the things that Safi has. Like, we need each other. This is like the perfect example of why we choose the things we choose. It's not random.
Yes. So all of that to say, if you need support, if you're curious, we're here. We have 2 more episodes of this season of Breaking the Barriers coming up, and then we're going to see what's going to come through in season 2. So if you have questions, topics you're excited for us to cover, please reach out and let us know, whether you leave a comment, send us an email, talk to us on Discord, or wherever else you find us. We're here.
We're here. We're here. This is fun. I love it.
All right. So until next time, my friends, we love you. We see you. We're cheering you on.